Imagine inheriting an empire defined by its wealth and divine favor, only to watch it end in a terrifying public execution. For the kings of ancient Judah, the crown was rarely just a symbol of power. It was a target for gruesome, inexplicable ends. This history begins with Solomon's son, Rehoboam. He took control of a kingdom at the height of its expansion, holding a territory that was unified, secure, and famously wealthy. But the unity lasted only as long as the coronation. When the people asked for lower taxes and a lighter workload, Rehoboam turned to the younger, more aggressive men in his court. He told his subjects that while his father used whips, he would use scorpions. That single decision triggered a massive rebellion. Solomon's empire shattered into two warring pieces, a 10-tribe kingdom in the north and a 2-tribe remnant in the south known as Judah. The political split was followed by a physical invasion. Just 5 years into his reign, the Egyptian king Shishak marched into Jerusalem. He bypassed the city's defenses and carried away the legendary golden shields Solomon had used to decorate the temple. To hide the loss of his father's gold, Rehoboam commissioned replacements made of cheap bronze. He had them paraded through the streets whenever he went to the temple, attempting to project a strength he no longer possessed. The bronze shields remained in Jerusalem for years, a daily metallic reminder that the kingdom's physical and spiritual core was already beginning to erode. As the generations passed, the rulers of Judah shifted their focus. They began to rely on foreign treaties and the strength of their own medicine, rather than the divine protection their ancestors claimed. King Asa marked the first major shift. After decades of ruling, he faced a severe, rotting disease in his feet. Instead of seeking counsel, he placed his trust entirely in physicians, eventually dying in a state of physical decay. But the violence truly escalated with King Jehoram. Driven by a need to eliminate any threat to his throne, he ordered the execution of all 6 of his brothers as soon as he took power. A prophet soon sent Jehoram a letter with a chilling warning. Because he had shed the blood of his own family, he would be struck by a bowel disease that would eventually cause his internal organs to fall out. For 2 years, the king lived in agonizing pain as his body rotted from the inside. He died in such profound isolation that not even his own court mourned his passing. His final humiliation came after death. His people refused to light the traditional honor fires for him, and they banned his body from being buried in the royal tombs alongside the other kings. Jehoram had secured his throne with the lives of his brothers, only to spend his final years consumed by a rot he could neither hide nor outrun. The royal line grew even more unstable under Queen Athaliah. She was the daughter of the infamous Jezebel, and her ascent to power was marked by a betrayal that nearly ended the dynasty entirely. When she learned her son was dead, Athaliah ordered the execution of her own grandchildren to ensure no one else could claim the crown. She ruled Judah through fear until the one child who had been hidden in the temple was finally revealed. Her reign ended outside the temple gates. As the young boy was crowned king, Athaliah was seized by the temple guards and executed, ending her attempt to seize the lineage by force. Decades later, King Uzziah took the opposite approach, building a massive military state. He fortified Jerusalem with towers and developed new engines of war that could launch arrows and massive stones from the walls. That success led to a sense of invincibility. Uzziah eventually stormed into the temple and attempted to perform the duties of a priest, a role the law strictly forbade for a king. As he stood over the altar in a rage, leprosy erupted on his forehead. He was immediately forced out of the temple and into a house of quarantine, where he remained until his death, unable to enter the very city he had fortified. Uzziah spent his remaining days behind walls, not of his own construction, but the walls of a leper's colony, separated from the kingdom he had worked so hard to build. 8-year-old Josiah took the throne at a time when the kingdom's original identity had been nearly erased. During his reign, workers found a forgotten scroll in the temple, and when it was read aloud in his presence, he tore his clothes in grief. Josiah spent his life systematically dismantling the idols and altars his predecessors had built. He even exhumed the bones of corrupt priests, burning them on their own altars to purge the land of its influences. But even this period of reform ended in blood. Josiah rode out to intervene in a war between Egypt and Assyria, and despite a warning from the Egyptian pharaoh to stay away, he was struck by archers and died on the way back to Jerusalem. Josiah's death ended the final period of stability for the nation. The momentum of the previous centuries was now carrying Judah toward an encounter with a much larger empire. The Babylonian Empire arrived as the final executor of the kingdom's history. Their armies moved across the region and eventually encircled the city of Jerusalem. Zedekiah was the final king of Judah. He was placed on the throne by the Babylonians to serve as a puppet, but his decision to rebel against King Nebuchadnezzar brought the full weight of the empire down upon his people. The Babylonians laid siege to the city for 2 years. Inside the walls, the famine was so severe that the social order completely disintegrated, leaving the population in a state of desperation. When the walls were finally breached at night, Zedekiah attempted to escape through a secret gate. He fled toward the plains of Jericho, leaving his city and his people behind. Babylonian soldiers caught him in the open. He was bound and brought to the headquarters of the Babylonian king to face the consequences of his betrayal. Before his sentence was carried out, he was forced to watch the execution of his sons. With their deaths, the royal lineage of Judah was effectively extinguished in his presence. Immediately after, the Babylonians gouged out Zedekiah's eyes. The sight of his sons' deaths was the final thing he would ever see before being led away in chains to a prison in Babylon. Jerusalem was dismantled, the temple was burned, and the city's survivors were marched into exile, leaving Solomon's empire a wasteland of stone and ash. The 400-year-old dynasty ended not in a final battle of glory, but in the silence of a ruined city and the dark of a Babylonian prison. These 20 kings left behind a history written in blood and bronze, a record of a kingdom that built its own path to the fire.